Hi everyone, welcome to a new live App Teardown session. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go over how I do App Teardowns, what an App Teardown even is, and then we'll do that live. So what's an App Teardown? An App Teardown is the name of a series of resources that we produce where we do basically what I'm going to be doing now, just not live. But zooming out a little bit more, it's a way for you to learn how to do App Store optimization because, as you'll see, App Store optimization isn't just a set of rules. It's not like programming where you know what to do and the compiler does it for you. It's actually a set of ideas that you can take and implement. And the implementation is always a little bit different. There's a lot of trial and error, and there are a lot of iterations. And so through App Teardowns, what I hope to achieve is to show you how other apps do it so you can learn from them and shortcut this whole process. I do this on successful apps, indie apps, games, iOS apps, Android apps. I've done it really across the board. I've even had a request after the last teardown session to do a web app, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense, so I can't do that. So the teardowns are really kind of an insight into how others do it, why others do what they do, and more important is, does it actually work for them? And when you look at all this and you put it in perspective, you start kind of connecting the dots. So we have tools to give you data about App Store optimization, popularity scores, ranks, and so forth. And then we have the skill of doing App Store optimization, and the App Teardowns sit in between. They connect the two. The thing about ASO, and for those of you who do ASO or have done ASO, you know that a lot of it is, like I was saying before, not really rule-based. So it's not like I can give you a list of things to do. You do them, and boom, success. If you could, and I could, that would be awesome. But that's not how it works. And so it's really iterative. The algorithms that Apple and Google use change all the time. The way competitors do ASO change all the time. And so it's a constant battle. And trial and error is pretty much the best way to go about it if you don't have any information to learn from. But you do. You can learn from others. And through teardowns, through the tools that we provide, we aim to do that, to shortcut the whole process. So you can see what they're doing, what's working out, what they're not doing, and what's an opportunity, and not fall into any pitfalls that you think might be great, but really are not. My analysis process is pretty straightforward. I first look at the App Store or Google Play landing page, and I see anything that's kind of obvious. By obvious, I mean anything that doesn't fit best practices. I've published a few guides on best practices for keywords, for screenshots, for kind of the whole caboodle. And so I look for those. If I see anything that's obviously wrong, that's a good starting point. But that's also an area where we can improve. Then I apply those best practices, and I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. Then I apply tricks. Tricks are slightly more advanced things that I've learned by doing this for a long, long time. And so you see things that may not make sense, but actually do work in production. And so I also published a few guides on those in the past. So I try to apply those and see where that takes us. And then I make assumptions about what I think could work better. That's really the key to all of this. And then I take those assumptions and I attempt to validate them with tools and with data. And usually that means I aim to make sure that the right popularity is in place, that the right performance is in place, and that we'll get what we actually want. The tools that I'll be using today, and the tools that I use in general for doing these teardowns when I do them every week, is one, Keyword Inspector, my best friend. Keyword Inspector, you put in a keyword, you select a store and a country, and it shows you all the results in near real time. And then it adds a layer of intelligence on top of it. And I'll show you why that is so useful, from understanding if a keyword is worth it, understanding how hard it would be to compete for a keyword, but also understanding if a keyword is something you even want to look at. It may not be. And then I use competitor keywords because that's the easiest way to find opportunities and also the easiest way to know what other competitors are using in their keyword lists. And then on top of it, I'm going to use competitor intelligence, which is sprinkled in all of these tools to understand what sort of performance we can even expect. So if I see a competitor and I think, wow, they're using these great keywords. All this makes sense. But then I see that they had 10 downloads yesterday. I don't know if I'm going to trust them as much. And so I'm going to use competitor intelligence to find out what sort of performance they're having. And that's pretty much it. Let's just do it. So to get started, what I did was when you RSVP, there was a link to submit an app. We collected, I think we closed the list at 50 submissions. And so if you didn't make it, I'm sorry, but there will be another one of these. And so there's always another chance. And then we took apps, mostly at random, but apps that I found some things that we can learn from. Some either good things or bad things or somewhere in the middle that really help prove the point here. And we're going to go through, I'm going to attempt to go through 3. Last month when we did this, I attempted to go through 3, went through maybe 2.5. So hopefully that's not going to be the same. Now, if you have any questions as I do this, put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom call. It's down on the bottom. I will attempt to answer all questions as they come in if they make sense in the context. If not, I'll try to get to them at the end. We reserved about 10 to 15 minutes at the end, which hopefully we'll get to. But again, if you have a question, just plump it into the Q&A section. I'll do my best to get to it. So let's get out of here. And let's get to the first app that I want to be looking at today. And the app is Musi, simple music streaming. Now, I'm not too familiar with any of the apps that I picked, and that is on purpose. I wanted to be kind of new and fresh to these apps, so I don't see them as a user, but I see them more as a marketer or business, from a business perspective. And Musi is a very interesting app from what I see here, and there's a lot that I like about this. I like the number of ratings, 1.7 million ratings. I like that it's number 5 in music, and I like that it has a high rating, but it's showing me a few things that go against those best practices. And the first one that I'm seeing is that the name and the subtitle repeat some things. Now, the name and the subtitle is what Apple uses to understand what the app does and when they should show it in search results. And so they take the string, they add it to this one, and they extract all the keywords that come out of it. That means that Musi is a keyword, simple is a keyword, simple music is a keyword. And they do that for all these that you see here. And so if you put music in twice, it actually gets dropped. And so this is limited to 30 characters, this entire subtitle. So is the name. Music is 5 characters. You just lost 5 characters. And potentially something that you can use to get more downloads. So that's one of those immediately obvious things that I would do. Now, there are a lot of opportunities here, but the app is doing pretty well already. So number 5 in music means it's probably getting a lot of downloads as is. So what we can do is we can try to squeeze even more by finding more keywords, more long tail keywords that are probably not used. And for that, Keyword Inspector will be our friend very soon. But before we even get the Keyword Inspector, there's a question in the Q&A. Is the do not repeat keywords rule the same on the Play Store? It sure is for the name and the short description on Google Play. So for Apple, it's the name and the subtitle. For Google, it's the name and the short description. In the long description on Google Play, repetition is the key. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. There's another app that I'm going to be touching on Google Play, and we'll talk about repetition. So what I'm seeing here is actually kind of interesting. I'm seeing Musi, which is the name of the app. It's good to put up front if you're building a brand, which is what I can see here. Simple music streaming. I'm going to guess that music streaming is probably what people are looking for when they look for music streaming, because that kind of makes sense to me. But I want to go beyond that. So we have music in here twice. We also have streaming in here twice. And then we have without limits. I don't know if anyone is looking for without or limits. And so this entire subtitle is really just losing all of its ASO value. Now, it might be a brand move, and it might be something that Musi wants to show as, and maybe use and reuse in other places on its web app, in some other ads, and that's why it's here. If that's the case, then everything I'm going to say is probably going to be wrong. That's not the case. I would change it to include keywords that are relevant. And because we said before that the name and the subtitle are actually being merged, and then combinations are taken out of them, there are a lot of combinations that we can use around music, streaming, simple, and using the keyword, the subtitle, will help us do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with music streaming. I have a feeling that's going to be a fairly useful keyword. And I'm going to jump into Keyword Inspector. I'm doing all of this in real time. Hopefully there are not going to be any issues. And so we're looking on the App Store, iPhone specifically, in the US, in the iOS App Store. And let's see what we get from music streaming. Popularity of 33. So not terribly high, but also not terribly low. There's something to work here. Musi is #1, and that kind of makes sense. It's in the name. They have the downloads, and the apps that are competing against it are not mentioning that in the name. They're mentioning streaming or maybe music, but they don't do the two together. So if you are Spotify and you throw streaming into the name of the subtitle, you'll likely get to the top of these search results. If you're Pandora, kind of the same thing. Actually, Pandora does do it. So maybe their keyword list is a little bit off. We'll talk about that later. But we're talking about Musi here, not about Pandora. So what I would do is, there are a couple of things that I can do. Step #1 is I can take all these apps because they seem to be pretty competitive. All these apps do fairly the same thing: Tidal, YouTube Music, Pandora, and Spotify. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them into competitor intelligence, and I'm going to go into ASO. So what's happening now is I put all these top results side by side so we can explore the kind of keywords that they're getting. There is an even better way to do this if we expand this to the full report, where we have filters. So there are a lot of keywords. I'm not going to read through 607 keywords right now. These are all the keywords that we found that these 5 apps are ranked in right now. So if you go into the App Store on an iPhone in the US and you look for any of these keywords, these apps will show up in these ranks. The important thing to see here is how they differ. So for example, radio, which is not exactly relevant to all of them, but it's a good one to show, is kind of dominated by Pandora and no one else. Tidal kind of exists, but that's pretty much it. So Spotify and Musi, if this was something that they wanted to attract, they could have gone in that direction. And let's see if YouTube is doing that. Nope. And so this is a good way to find opportunities, meaning find keywords that your competitors are using and not you. So if I'm Musi, what I would do is I would look for, let's say, any keyword that is more popular than a 33, because that's what we started with. So let's go 35 to 100. And then let's go to keywords we're not tracking. We're not tracking any of this. So let's go for keywords we're not really ranked in. That is an interesting list. Not what I wanted at all. Sort by popularity. Okay, this is a little bit better. So now we're seeing the keywords that competitors are using that we may or may not be ranked in. And we can easily then find new keywords to replace basically that entire subtitle that's not giving us a lot of opportunities. And so one of the things that we want to look for is, other than branded keywords like Pandora and SoundCloud, we want to look for keywords that we're not using that have a high popularity. We're using most of these, and so I'm going to continue to page 2. Ooh, stream. Okay, so we're using streaming, but we're not using stream. Stream has a popularity of 57. Let's explore that a little bit more. So so we found actually a very interesting opportunity. Stream is something that you would associate with music as a user. I know I would. It has a popularity of 57, which is more than double the popularity of music streaming, which we started with, where Musi was #1. And look who is controlling this category. Microsoft Stream, I don't even know what that is. All these apps that we're seeing here really have nothing to do with music streaming. If you look at their downloads, they're also not going to be hard to beat. And so a really good opportunity that we just discovered from Musi is to add stream into their subtitle. If they add stream into their subtitle, I'm guessing they'll fall somewhere in the top 5. right away. So within a few hours or a few days. And then if Apple deems that it's relevant, and they will, because streaming is very close to stream, they will actually rise up. So if you're Musi and you're listening to this, I highly recommend working stream into your subtitle. And then I would do this again and again and again until I find more relevant keywords and make that subtitle really meaningful. Wow, that was fun. In addition to that, what I also see here is, and this is a good way to think of keyword ideas, is all these titles, all these captions. If you've read any of my teardowns before, you know that I'm really big on white captions on a dark background, and this does it. I would make this text a little bit bigger just so it's easier to read and it kind of seems like there's space, but that's a nitpick. Other than that, I really like what I'm seeing here as far as screenshots. So the takeaway here is if you're finding keywords that people are looking for, meaning keywords with high popularity, it's a really good idea to reuse them in the screenshots, because if someone is looking for that keyword and they see it again and again and again, they'll associate it with your app in their minds. So that was a very good find from Musi. This got me excited. Next up, I have a game on Google Play. Let's see if there are any questions. There is a question. If they were trying to save characters, could they replace Musi with Musi colon? Would the colon get stripped out? Would they still keyword match on Musi? Yes, the colon would get stripped out, and Musi would still be a useful keyword. And you can see that done by a lot of apps who need that additional extra space. I think it's more of how you want the name of the app to be read, or how you want it to look, than anything else. Do you think one horizontal screenshot as the first screenshot makes sense? I'm not sure I understand, because you need to have both. Or are we talking about Google Play at this point? Because if we are talking about Google Play, that's a whole other ballpark. But if we're still on the App Store, yes and no. In general, I think screenshots should be A/B tested. So if we are talking about Google Play, I would highly recommend A/B testing your screenshots, whether it's one horizontal and then the rest are slightly bit different, which might be happening here. I looked at this a little bit earlier. And if not, you can A/B test layout, looks, colors, pretty much anything. So when it comes to questions of A/B test of screenshots, I would say A/B test. Take your idea, put it on especially on Google Play. It's super easy to A/B test. There's no better way to do this. One more question. Hi, Ariel. Hi, Karina. How does combined words work as keywords? Should they be separated by commas when entering at the store? If I understand correctly, you mean the keyword list in App Store Connect. That's a little bit different. I actually have a whole guide on how to write those keyword lists and how to optimize them. The gist is they should be single keywords, single words, separated by a comma with no spaces. And this way you can take out all the duplication. They should also be singular and not plural, because the algorithm will handle both. And so in the case of Musi, if we just wanted to take a quick look, we would do simple, comma music, comma streaming, comma without, comma limits, if we wanted to turn this particular string into a keyword list. All right, so moving on to PGA Tour Golf Shootout. I've never played this game, but it does look cool. I looked through the screenshots and it looks interesting, which means it did its job. The screenshot set got me engaged with this. I saw places, I saw gameplay. I'm not sure what I'm seeing here in these two, but it seems pretty relaxing, so I like that. And so in general, the screenshots really attracted me. So now that I looked at the screenshots, which is what a lot of people start with, I'm going to go back to the name. On Google Play Online, you cannot see the short description, the equivalent of the subtitle, so we're going to focus on the name to make it easier. But one of the good things about Google Play is the name is longer. Apple gives you 30, Google Play gives you more. And so you can really think about the kind of use cases that people would have and try to get those types of keywords in there. So PGA, obviously, everyone knows about the PGA if they're thinking golf. Golf makes sense. Tour fits PGA. Shootout, I'm not entirely sure about. So that's the kind of thing where the game itself wants to use this as part of the name, but it's less likely that people are looking for golf shootout on the App Store, and we can verify that in a minute. So what I would do here is I would use this and then either put a colon or a dash, some sort of a separator, and then add a few more of the use cases or the things that this game gives you. Now, this is actually kind of an interesting one because usually games target young people, and so you know what kind of keywords to engage them with. But I have this hunch that golf is going to be played by a wider variety of people. And I am thinking this because it's golf, and kids play golf a lot less than adults. Now, that changes a little bit because that means that the people who are searching for this might be searching a little bit differently than if they were going after an action game or a puzzle game or one of those. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind because it's possible your competitors are not doing this type of analysis. And so they're just aiming to go after all the game keywords where we're going to be looking at a slightly bit different direction. So what I did was I brought up the panel of Explore. Explore is similar to competitor intelligence. It's an extension of it, where you can see the audience breakdown, basically, based on our estimates. And so for PGA Tour Golf Shootout, we look at the audience, and it's kind of even across the ages, which is not something you see normally for games. Normally, games skew the very, very, very young first bar. And so this means that we need to think about keywords in terms of not just how young people who have been using their phones all the time would look for them, but also how these larger, older age groups would look for them. And so let's give it a try. So just like I did last time, I'm going to go to Inspector, and we're going to look for maybe PGA Tour. I think that's a good starting point. We'll just switch to Google Play. And Inspector works in real time where possible, and so it's getting all the results right now. And we're going to give it all the time it needs as long as it's fast. And what we aim to do here is we're going to take what the results are. We're going to do a similar type of analysis by looking at the competitors and get an idea for what's going on. So as kind of expected, PGA Tour Golf Shootout is number 2 here. It kind of makes sense, which is perfect. Now, these apps don't seem as interesting, so I don't know if the first thing I want to do is actually look at their keywords. I kind of want to find keywords that are related. And so we do this automatically where we scan through the top apps for each keyword. We scan through their keywords, and we find associations. You'll find a lot of branded keywords in this, I have a feeling, because it's PGA. But hopefully we'll find something that has to do with golf and has to do with shootout or golf game in that case. There we go. So quite a few keywords. Let's, popularity is good. So this has given me some ideas for what I can be looking for that isn't just PGA Tour or PGA Golf. I like the idea of golf games. Let's see what that looks like. And hopefully that will give us better results, and those results will scan with the competitor keywords tool that I was using before and go from there. That looks a little bit healthier. So now we moved a little bit away from PGA Tour, but there's really not much you can do with PGA. It's pretty set. And now we're just looking at golf. So we have Golf Master, Golf Battle. All these are good keywords to look at. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and we're going to jump into the top 5. Now, we can see their performance here, and this is performance in the US for the last 30 days. All of this is estimates. All of this is completely estimated by us. There's money in this category, obviously. There are downloads in this category, so all the incentive to continue and optimize. And so again, now we're collecting all the keywords that these games are in or ranked in, and we're going to expand this to the full report so we can apply filters. My favorite. Again, 661 keywords, while nice, is not something I want to look at, so I'm going to go up to 42. It's a good number. And let's start scanning them. Now, you'll see that our PGA Golf Shootout is not actually on this list, which is an opportunity, to say the least. Opportunity for improvement, but also means that all the keywords here are keywords that we can potentially use. There's nothing here that we already use, or there's nothing here that's super obvious. all there is are keywords that we can learn from. And wow, so Golf Clash is kind of dominant here, where everyone else is not. Golf Games continues to come back. PGA Tour, we came back to it. Let's see what else. Grubhub for some reason. Can't say understand why. Let's filter this a little bit better, and let's say anything that's ranked in, we're not going to go that high. We're going to go top 32 because that worked for me. So actually, there aren't that many. This is somewhat surprising, but also means that we have to focus a little bit more. So one of the things that I'm seeing here, and I saw this before when we looked at it, is sports games. Sports is a little bit less narrow, less focused, but at the same time, if there is something that we can do here with this, that could be useful. So quite a few apps. Download-wise, they're not as far off than what we have, and so we can probably fit in. And we already know what those look like, so let's look at related keywords to that. And that's how I would go about finding more keywords. And then once I have these keywords, I would go back in here and I would add a dash probably, and then we can start adding them. So PGA Tour is something we definitely want to keep. That's, as we saw before, very popular. Golf we also want to keep because that fits. Shootout, I guess we can keep. That's not really a terrible thing. But then we can dash and then we can say sports games or sports activity or golf any way you choose. Where's my window? My window is here. And we can continue going until we find, okay, this is very broad. I think we moved a little bit too far, which happens from time to time when you do keyword research. And so we're going to go back to golf games. So the 57. I'm actually curious to see what golf game is. 32. Interesting. So golf game and golf games are different, and people are looking for a games plural. Now, you don't have to actually type out games versus game when you optimize your app name because the algorithm will handle both, and I actually recommend against it. But if we know that the difference is so big, I would use games in the name, even though it kind of goes against the best practices, because no results. Weird. Because when users are, if there's more interest in golf games, I would search for, I as a user would see it and would probably engage just a tiny bit more with something that had games in its name as opposed to game. Very little minor. This is, again, something that I would test. I would not make any of these changes blindly and hope for good. I would make the change and then give it a few weeks and see if that worked, and if not, undo that change. So another thing that we now see is that Battle, Clash, all of those are back in here. Clash might be a little bit too specific, but something like Battle or something like Master or something like King are keywords that you can continue looking into and then add them to the name of the app so it can become something like PGA Tour Golf Shootout dash. I had something and I just forgot it. Dash, what would I do? That's a good question. Something that has to do with battle, something that has to do with games, and put it all into the name. And then what you're getting out of it is you're getting golf and game would together become golf game. Golf and games, same thing. PGA game, PGA Tour, PGA Golf. So every time you add another word, you're really extending the list of keywords that you're adding. Now, one tiny aside. Normally, I would not recommend putting game or games in the name of your app, and that's because Apple and Google would add the category to the name. But that's not really a hard and fast rule, so sometimes doesn't mean all the time, and just because they do it automatically doesn't mean that they give it the same weight. And so if you have the space, there's really nothing stopping you from giving that a try. And again, try it. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it, and take it away, replace it next time you do this. Going back to the beginning, this is an iterative process. So every time you make a change, monitor the results. And when you monitor the results, you can see if you're going up or down. And that's the best way to do this. So that was PGA Tour Golf Shootout. There is a question. If we add a non-relevant keyword to the store listing of an app, the chances of ranking is lesser in Play Store. Yes and no and maybe. I think ultimately it depends on the keyword. So if you're adding a keyword that is less relevant, sure, you're much less likely to rank in it because there's no context for it. So when the algorithm looks for other things that are similar enough and sees if you say them, the answer is going to be no, and so it's going to probably push you down. That is true for keywords that are competitive or keywords that are popular. It's less true for keywords that are kind of useless. And so there are keywords that if you put in the app name, you'll probably rank for automatically, regardless of what you are. Those keywords are probably not going to help you get more downloads. So I would say focus on what your app does or what your game really provides, and only use those as you optimize your name. Now, next is Sleepiest. Get soothing sleep. Who doesn't like to sleep? So this one interested me because these screenshots follow pretty much all the things that you want to follow in screenshots, and they make use of both the name and the subtitle, and it's also a very interesting icon. So let's apply the process again, and immediately I can see that while the name and the subtitle work together, sounds, bedtime, not really repeating, bedtime, sleep sounds good, sleep sounds also sounds good, and more is not really something anyone is going to look for. So no one's going to look for sleep and more. No one's going to look for sounds and more or soothing and more. And so it sounds kind of okay. I think in marketing speak, you'll see a lot of and mores, which is something I don't think anyone should do anyway, but it doesn't really help. And so it's a waste of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters at least. And so again, what I would do here is try to find keywords to fill in this gap. So when I think about sleeping, let's go for sleep sounds. I don't know if that's going to be the most relevant, but I have a feeling that's more interesting than soothing sleep. Let's try both. It's loading. It's moving. Oh, there we go. So soothing sleep. I don't really have any idea for what kind of popularity this is going to have, so let's try this. On the one hand, I think it might be popular. On the other, I don't really see myself searching for soothing sleep on the App Store. So it's doing this in real time again. We're going to wait. Oh, there we go. So a popularity of 9 is making me not even want to wait for the entire list of results to load, because 9 is not really something that's interesting. But instead, let's look for sleep sounds, which is another keyword that this name and subtitle combination target. And there we go. Boom. Popularity of 63. So a good guess here. Now, the interesting thing here is that we don't see the app that we are actually working with. So Sleepiest is not on this list. Not in top 15 at least. Oh, it is number 15. 15 is not really all that high considering they have more downloads than this app, more downloads than, I guess, a bunch of these apps. So really what we have to find out is why is soothing sleep in the name? If you made Sleepiest, I would love to know why you used soothing in the name, and if that's more of a branded move or if that's based on keywords. But what I would do now is I would start moving in this direction. So soothing might be something that you want to include because you want to include it for no reason based on data. And so you can keep that. I would move it to the subtitle in this case, potentially the end of the subtitle. And let's try and find more interesting keywords here. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to compare these results. I'm curious about these downloads. I'm curious to see, actually, now that we're here, it's just my own curiosity, if demand for these types of apps actually increased because of the pandemic. Yeah, kind of. What is green? Relaxed melodies went up quite a lot during April, during May. Huh. Okay. Curiosity aside, we're going to continue back to keyword research. And I do have a question how long will it take App Store and Play Store to rank the keywords? What is the proper frequency to update the keywords for both stores? So that's a good question and a tricky question, all in the same one. Apple tends to show results almost immediately. So if you are looking at the hour by hour data, you'll probably say within, I would say less than 12 hours. It may not be the end result, meaning it fluctuates a lot. So you can see a huge drop, a huge increase, and then a big drop until it stabilizes, or you can see a huge increase and then you'll stay there for a long time. I normally give it a few days on the App Store, up to a week, and then 2 to 3 weeks is the minimum at which I would change this. Probably about a month. 3 to 4 weeks is where I would change keywords to test them. That's on Apple. On Google side, things are a little bit slower because they look at data a little bit differently. So I would expect results normally within 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 weeks. And I would say don't really make any significant keyword changes, anything less than 4 weeks. Now keep in mind that Apple has a list of keywords that you give them, and Google doesn't. So for Google, it's really based on what you tell them through the description, through the name, through the short and long description. And it takes some time to figure all that out. It's not something that happens immediately. Where for Apple, you just give it to them, and they kind of take you for your word and try to do the best they can. And that's why I would wait a little bit longer with Google. I also have a guide on how long it takes and how to actually validate your results and how to make sure that you do it right. So you can learn from that as well. Back to Sleepiest. What do we have here? We have quite a few opportunities. So we have a bunch of keywords all over the place, but they're really all over the place. We're sorted by popularity. I'm going to make that go away. And we'll sort it by, let's say, relax. So wow, they're in a lot of places. Sleep sounds, that hunch from before, is interesting. So again, I would move that up top. Sleep music, less popular considerably, but still pretty popular. It's better than a 9, which is currently kind of the main thing. So that is definitely how you get more downloads, I think, moving away from that 9. Now, soothing sounds is here. And that's, I think, a good thing to have. That's why I would keep it, move it to the subtitle, because soothing sounds has nothing to do with sleep. And so if someone is looking for something that doesn't have anything to do with sleep, when they see Sleepiest as the name of the app and they see sleep in the name, it may not be the first thing they download. They may think it's only for sleep, and they're not only looking for something related to sleep. So keep that in mind, even though it might seem like an easy target. And we got a whole bunch. So sleep sounds, calm sounds. Let's go back to popularity. Hi, white noise sleep tracker. Everyone wants to track everything, and they should. And let's expand this so we can apply some filters. So I'm going to go for, no, too high popularity. Let's go for anything above a 35. And then we'll look for what competitors are ranked in. So let's just do this. Actually, even better. Let's say everywhere where competitors are ranking in 1 to 10. So that's a very focused list. And unlike some of the other apps we looked at, there's a lot of stuff here. So deep sleep, brain sounds, all these things are actually good things to target. And I bet you that Sleepiest is not going to be in many of them. So let me add Sleepiest to this. We'll replace this. And we'll keep this. We'll drop this one. So look at these differences. 1, 13, 36, 91. These are such good opportunities that with minimal changes, minimal tweaks, we can actually rank for. So I would go back now to this. And what I would do is I would integrate something like Calm. I would bring sounds up, replace the word get, because get is not a word people are normally looking for, and add more keywords to the subtitle, because I don't think this is 30 characters, although the character counter in my head is not giving me an accurate reading. But that's how I would go about this, and we found quite a few opportunities here. is a very interesting space that I'm seeing. Now, beyond that, we can go back to that same thing that we were saying before about how keywords in the name and the subtitle show intent, meaning someone is looking for them. And if we repeat them in the screenshots, we might be able to engage them even more than we would if we don't. Now, these keywords are nice. These screenshots are nice. I like what's going on here. White captions on a dark background makes me feel happy. I like seeing the app, how it would be used, how I could use it. The one thing that I don't love is something like this where it says story, sounds, and meditations. Stories about what kind of sounds? I'm looking for a sleeping app, not necessarily a meditation app, so I need context, and I think that's lacking a little bit. But other than that, everything here looks good. So I would find more keywords, replace some of these keywords, and then I would take some of these keywords and bring them back into the screenshots. And that's how I would do, how I would optimize Sleepiest. Now, there is a question from Erica. Hi, this competitor analysis side of App Figures that you are working with on this webinar, is that the one that is available at $299 a month, or is this accessible at other paid levels? Yes, Erica, this is the one that's available at $299 a month. We worked extremely hard to make this price point what it is. Normally, this costs thousands if you go anywhere else, and you would need to sign annual contracts, and it's a whole thing. So we worked for a very, very, very long time, and our business model is very different than pretty much anyone else out there, and that's how we can offer it for $299 a month, and we don't require any sort of long-term contract. So upgrade for a month and then go back to any other plan. Another question, does a video preview in the App Store improve ASO? Yes and no, and maybe. That is a really good question that I get asked all the time. I don't have a guide about videos, even though I should, but I did mention it in one of the latest teardowns. In general, yes, it is helpful, because if you think about it and put yourself in a user's shoes, they search for something, they found a name that's full of keywords, they see a couple of screenshots that might look good, but they don't exactly know what they are. The only way for them to make a determination of whether they want to download it is really all that's on the page. So they don't know how the app would work for them. All they know is they have this thing that they want to do. So in the case of Sleepiest, I would say I'm looking for something to help me sleep. I'm looking for some sort of a sound or something else that would help me sleep because I can't sleep. And if you show me how this app can help me sleep, I'm a lot more likely to download it, especially because most apps are free with in-app purchases today. So there's no friction on pricing. I don't have to think, do I really want to spend $199 or $699 or whatever it is? And so a video, when done correctly and shows you what the app is giving you, could definitely help. Now, I've heard of cases where there's only one way to show what the app does, and that is a very kind of technical video, more of a tutorial. And those usually get people to not watch them. And if they watch them, they don't see exactly what they need. They think it doesn't exist in the app, which may or may not be true. And so then you have a drop-off. Those cases are pretty rare. But what I would say, just like screenshots, test it. You can't really A/B test on the App Store, but you can test. So you can upload a video, give it about a month, and see what happens. And then it's really imperative to, one, take a look at your downloads, and also take a look at your App Store impressions. So in the analytics side of App Figures, you can overlay these two side by side, or one on top of the other, actually. And so you can look at if impressions remain the same, the downloads also remain the same. If impressions went up, are downloads also up? And if so, by how much? And so you can easily tell if that helped. And eventually, if it didn't help, take it off. It's kind of silly to spend time working on a video just to take it off. But ultimately, if that's the kind of thing that can get you more downloads, I think it's worth the effort. So that's what I would do about it. And I believe that is it. No, we got another question. We got multiple questions. So let me just say, this is it for Sleepiest. There are definitely opportunities here that are going to be really easy to take advantage of. So if you're the one behind Sleepiest, hopefully you got something good out of it, and hopefully you can get more downloads. So I think we're done officially with the teardowns themselves, which gives us 5 minutes, maybe even more, for Q&A. All right, 2 questions. If you have questions, now is really the time to do it. Karina is asking, how often is reasonable to change icons, screenshots, and keywords? I think at a minimum, 3 to 4 weeks. I would say probably 4 weeks. But it also really depends. If the change is drastic, I would give it a little bit more time. Or the other way around. If the change is drastic, you can probably take less time. If the change is very subtle, I would give it more time. And the reason is it may not be as noticeable. It may not be as noticeable to the algorithm in the case of keywords. And so you probably want to do that a little bit less. And again, there is a guide on this, which we will share. Next question from Oleg. Is optimization for install from search results page worthwhile? I am very biased and I would say absolutely, but that's only because I've seen the results. Now, I get this question all the time where people ask me, people say, I don't even know if it's worth the time, but I'm going to do it anyway. You're welcome, Karina. I don't think that's the right attitude for two reasons. I've been doing business for quite a while. Before App Figures, I was in search engine optimization, and before that in app and game development. And the things that I picked up along the way is that if there's an opportunity, you should really try to take advantage of it. And ASO is an opportunity, especially these days, especially because not everyone is doing this. If you go back to the world of search engine optimization, which is the equivalent online, you'll see that 15 years ago, it was extremely easy. And when I say extremely easy, I mean just a little bit harder than what ASO is now. But over the last 15 years, a lot of things have changed, and now it's incredibly difficult to rank well for Google results. You may get one or two just accidentally or by luck, but if you're trying to do this for a business and you want to do this for real, it takes a lot of effort. ASO is not there yet. And so every day where you're not actually doing ASO, in my opinion, is a day missed. And every time that you're not taking advantage of a keyword opportunity, like the ones we saw here from Musi and for Sleepiest and even for PGA, which was a little bit more difficult, those are times that you're missing out. And someone is eventually going to come and take those advantages. So I think it's absolute. I see it at this point, 2020, as a necessity and not as a nice to have. Maybe 2 years ago it was a nice to have. At this point, it's a necessity. And as time progresses, it will continue to remain a necessity. Damien is asking, does the discover keywords work in other languages besides English? I don't see results for French keywords in France, for example. It absolutely does. I would love to take a look into why you're not seeing any results. It really depends on the apps themselves. So if the apps are not very popular or if they're not ranking for a lot of keywords, you probably won't see a lot of keywords there, but it scans all the different app stores in all the different languages, all the ones we support. So if you want, you can send me a link to what you're looking at right now. My email is, I'll share my email in the chat, and I'd love to take a look at it. All right, another question. In the title, subtitle, and long description, in both stores, how important is placing the keywords in the right place, and what is the right place, semantically and from ASO point of view? Lovely question. So I think everything should sound grammatically correct. So if you're trying to get as many keywords in and they don't exactly fit into a sentence, you shouldn't try to keep them as a keyword list, because someone is going to look at this and ultimately a human is making that decision and not the algorithm. The algorithm is making the decision where to show you. A human is making a decision whether to download it or not. And you want that decision to always be yes. And when it's just a list of keywords, I think it's a little bit more difficult to actually say yes. And so grammatically, I would keep them all. I would make it seem readable, and I would make it actually something that sounds good. From the algorithm standpoint, the keywords that are in the beginning are the keywords that are worth more. You only have 50 characters on Google. You only have 30 on Apple. So it's not really that big of a difference. But I would still move as much as you can to the front as opposed to the back. Now, this kind of leads to an interesting question of whether your brand name should even be in the name of the app. I believe the answer is always yes. I believe if you have a brand that you want to build, it should be as close to the front as possible. If you have a brand that has 0 downloads, move that to the end. And if you want to be very aggressive about a particular set of keywords, maybe because they're really competitive or because you really want to get into them and start building momentum, put your company name at the end. I think users are still going to see it. The algorithm is going to pick you up for it. So if someone searches for your company name, you're still probably going to be the first. But that's how I would look at it. Another question. Recently, I experienced a drastic drop in Google Play Explore traffic while search traffic is the same. Any suggestions? Not really off the top of my head. I think that it really depends on the type of keywords and maybe the competition and what they're doing. If they are featured, if they are doing more ASO, they might take away some of those impressions and push you down a little bit more. So I would first say look at the kind of keywords that all the keywords that are related to that one keyword or all the keywords that you ranked in and see if there's been any substantial drop and then continue from there. Now, search traffic and explore traffic are obviously different, and so keywords shouldn't exactly change the explore traffic. That just means that usage in Google Play changed a little bit and patterns changed a little bit. So it really, really depends on the app and also on the keywords. If you send me an email, I'd love to take a look at this. Another question from Oleg. Sorry to clarify, you don't have to apologize. It is very important, but optimizing for install from search result page seem to require a different approach from optimizing for install from app page. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, totally misunderstood that question from before. I think I get it vaguely all the time. That's why my mind jumped to it. Optimizing for install from search results versus app page has so many nuances, and it's such a super advanced really way of looking at ASO in general. So that's a whole conversation, and I think you do a whole webinar on how to do it. I think the same principles kind of really follow. So, for example, the difference we're talking about here is trying to get someone to download your app before they even get to the search results page or to the App Store details page, I should say. And so you don't really get to see all the screenshots. You don't really get to see a full page with everything that the app has to offer. And the worst thing is you see all of them, you see the app with other apps right below it or above it, depends on where you are. And so what I would do is kind of the same that I would do for the App Store page as well, and move all the important screenshots to the front. I would also use the right captions and also make sure that my keywords align between the screenshots and also the name and the subtitle. So pretty much best practices. I will just continue to do this. Hopefully that was the right answer this time. Next question, is accurate localization of keywords important? Absolutely. It really, though, depends again on the keyword and on the competition. So if you are competing with apps that have localized names, you probably should localize. If the localized version of a keyword, though, is less popular than the non-localized version of the keyword, then that's a question that you want to ask yourself, and whether you want to cater a little bit more to users and you don't mind taking the hit on impressions, or you want to go after all the impressions and hope that users will be fine with it. So it's more a question that depends on the competition. It's a question that also depends on how you want to present your app. I would use Inspector for this and look for the keywords specifically that you're going after and see the popularities. I've seen this a lot with keywords in Germany, where on the App Store, for example, the German keyword for wallet, if we're looking at Bitcoin or anything like that, is less popular than wallet itself, which is kind of crazy because you would expect that locally you'd be searching in your own language. But it really depends on the keyword. So I would go after the data. Next question, is getting ranked for both singular and plural form of keyword true for all languages or only for English? That is a good question, but I would say look at the data again. So look at the popularities and look at the apps that are ranking in those keywords, and then you'll see if they include the singular or plural in their name. For English, I know that's right. I know that right off the bat because I do localization, or I do more English most of the time. For other localizations, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that it kind of carries across as much as possible. Dennis asks, what about the icon of the app? I see logos, but not only, and changing it affects existing users, so A/B testing is maybe not the right solution. So I'm talking about the icon that's in the App Store, less so the icon that's in the app itself, which come from two different places. I would say test the one on the App Store Don't test the one on people's devices. Ooh, a good question. How important are backlinks and anchor text SEO for keyword alongside ASO? For Apple, not at all. For Google, a lot. So Google is very sophisticated. Google does not ask you for a keyword list. With Google, they guess what your keywords are. And when they guess, they take all the inputs they can. They look at your reviews. They look at the inbound links. They look at pretty much everything. And so if you can direct traffic to your app with links that are tagged, meaning links where the caption inside of them or the link itself in the URL itself has something useful, then do it. Now, for Apple, even though it doesn't really count for ASO, it's still a good way to get traffic because some searches don't start on the App Store. That's not really the purpose of this webinar, but I also have a guide on SEO and how to leverage that to get more downloads through Google. So if someone starts a search on Google, there's really no reason they wouldn't get to your app. You can have even a simple landing page, and you can do very simple SEO to get people to find it. And then from there, you take them to the App Store page, and then these rules continue to apply. So I think it's important. I think it's always something that you should keep in mind. Oleg, you're welcome. Can you do a teardown for Sweatcoin app next time, please? If you take that app and submit it into our form for the next webinar, it might. It just might. So these are all the, one more questions. Oh, two more questions, 2 in 1. I think we'll take this and then we'll end because it's getting late. So Thomas is asking, how many main keywords? One more key. All right, keep the questions coming. We'll close in about 2 minutes. How many main keywords should we focus on in the long description? Just 1, 2, or 3? And then what is the ideal keyword density in the long description for the main keywords? Same question for secondary keywords. I would actually say, so this is specifically talking about Google Play because Google Play, the repetition and density are important in the long description. And so I normally focus on 3 to 5 main keywords. And then I try to find keywords that are related and relevant and kind of sound the same, but are not exactly the same, and do another 5 of those. Primary, secondary, kind of. The ideal density, there's no ideal density from what I've seen. There's too much. There's too little and too much. And I think the range of too much is more than 3%. The range of too little is less than 1%. So you can say that the ideal range is between 1 and 3%. It becomes very difficult or very dependent on the kind of keywords and how close they are. So if the top 5 keywords that you're optimizing for are completely different, that's one thing, and you can have that repetition go up. But if they're fairly similar, or if they share a single kind of a single base, I would do a lot less of them. So somewhere in the 1 to 3 category, in the 3% range, maybe 2-ish% to be on the safe side. And this is something that you can experiment with over time. And then every time I say last question, one more comes in. So I'm just going to continue answering them until for the next minute or so. How important to use HTML tags in Google Play Store description? Do they have the same effect like ASO? For the most part, no. I think they make everything look a little bit nicer, and when things look nicer, they usually get more engagement. So HTML tags, you can only use basic ones on Google Play, and I think you should use bold, for example, to highlight things. You can use emoji to make nice lists. When people read this, and this is mostly for people, not for ASO, I think it's useful and it makes the experience a little bit nicer. In general, when I write descriptions for Google Play, the reason it's so difficult is because it's kind of like everyone is writing these descriptions that are extremely either very descriptive but very boring, or very short, like someone didn't think about them and thought about them at the end. And so I think for most of the people who are browsing Google Play, reading descriptions is not top priority. They're expecting either something long and boring, or they're expecting short and vague. And so people are not coming into Google Play to read descriptions. So if you want them to read your description because maybe you have a feature no one else has, or maybe you took the time to discover something and implement it in a way no one else does, you have to make it exciting. And HTML and emojis make that happen. Is there a way to contact other viewers of this webinar? That is a great question. On the chat, I would imagine. Just say hi and go from there. And then one more question. Can you explain how keywords in the title of an app bundle rank in relation to other apps? So app bundles, I imagine you are talking about the App Store here. They're, in theory, ranked the same way. The main reason why that you don't see app bundles in general is because normally they don't have the downloads necessary to even compete. App bundles are not free. All the other apps are free, so the download ratios are going to be so off. But in general, they work the same way. Do you have any bundles? I would love to hear how ASO is working for bundles. I don't get to do that too often. So email me or share that in the chat. And I think that's it. We're only 12 minutes over time. Thank you for joining us. I hope you got something valuable out of this. As I mentioned in the beginning, we did record this, and we will turn this into a video and share it with everyone within the next 24 hours. And if you have any questions, my email is somewhere in this chat. Send me an email, whether it's a question about your ASO, if you need my help with ASO, if you have a question about our tools, go for it. And last but not least is we are going to share a promo code for all the attendees in the chat. This is not going to be a part of the recording. There's going to be a 25% off promo code for going on the Grow plan, which includes all the competitor intelligence tools and also all the ASO tools that I'm looking at. So that's our gift for you sticking around all the way to the end. So we'll share that in the chat, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one next month. Thank you for joining us.